We're back. Okay. Chapter 13. Y'all. Manon is in trouble. Okay. Chapter 13. Thank you. I thought so too. Thank you. Chapter 13. Selena didn't realize how exhausted she was until all sounds, Emery's soft singing from the table, the thud of dough as he kneaded it, the chopping of Luca's knife, and his ceaseless chatter about everything and anything stopped. And she knew what she'd find when she turned down the stairwell. Her hands were pruny, fingers aching, back and neck throbbing, but Rowan was leaning against the archway of the stairwell, arms crossed and violence beckoning in his lifeless eyes. Let's go. Bye, Sarah. Love you. Though his features remained cold, she had the distinct impression that he was somewhat annoyed at her for not sulking in a corner, bemoaning the state of her nails. As she left, Luca drew a finger across his neck as he mouthed, "Good luck." Rowan led her through a small courtyard, where sentries tried to pretend they weren't watching their every move, and out into the forest. The ward magic woven between the ring of megaliths again nipped at her skin as they passed, and nausea washed through her. Without the constant heat of the kitchen, she was halfway frozen by the time they strode between the moss-coated trees, but even that was only a vague flicker of feeling. Rowan trekked up a rocky ridge toward the highest reaches of the forest, still clouded in mist. She barely paused to take in the view of the foothills below, the plains before them, all green and fresh and safe from Ardalan. Rowan didn't utter a single word until they reached what looked like the weather-stained ruins of a temple. It was now no more than a flat bed of stone blocks and columns whose carvings had been dulled by wind and rain. To her left lay Wendlin, foothills and plains in peace. To her right arose the wall of the Cambrian mountains, blocking any side of the immortal lands beyond. Behind her, far down, she could make out the fortress snaking along the spine of the mountain. Rowan crossed the cracked stones, his silver hair battered by the crisp, damp wind. She kept her arms loose at her sides, more out of reflex than anything. He was armed to the teeth, his face a mask of unyielding brutality. She made herself give a little smile, her best attempt at a dutiful, eager expression. "Do your worst." He looked her over from head to toe, the mist-damp shirt, now icy against her puckered skin, the equally stained and damp pants, the position of her feet. "Wipe that smarmy lying smile off your face." His voice was as dead as his eyes, but it had a razor-sharp bite behind it. She kept her smarmy lying smile. "I don't know what you're talking about." He stepped toward her, the canines coming out this time. "Here's your first lesson, girl. Cut the horse shit. I don't feel like dealing with it, and I'm probably the only one who doesn't give a damn about how angry and vicious and awful you are underneath." "I don't think you particularly want to see how angry and vicious and awful I am underneath. Go ahead and be as nasty as you want, princess. Because I've been 10 times as nasty for 10 times longer than you've been alive." She didn't let it out. No, because he didn't truly understand a thing about what lurked under her skin and ran claws down her insides. But she stopped any attempt to control her features, her lips pulled back from her teeth. "Better. Now shift." She didn't bother to sound pleasant as she said, "It's not something I can control. If I wanted excuses, I'd ask for them. Shift." She didn't know how. She had never mastered it as a child, and there certainly hadn't been any opportunities to learn in the past decade. "I hope you brought snacks, because we're going to be here a long, long while if today's lesson is dependent upon my shifting. You're really going to make me enjoy training you." She had a feeling he could have switched out training you for eating you alive. "I've already participated in a dozen versions of the master-disciple training saga, so why don't we just cut the horse shit too?" His smile turned quieter, more lethal. "Shut your smart-ass mouth and shift." A shuddering rush went through her, a spear of lightning in the abyss. "No." And then he attacked. She contemplated his blows all morning, the way he'd moved, the swiftness and angles. So she dodged the first blow, sidestepping his fists, strands of her hair snapping in the wind. She even twisted far enough in the other direction to avoid the second strike. But he was so damn fast she could barely register the movements, so fast that she had no chance of dodging or blocking or anticipating the third blow. Not to her face, but to her legs, just as he had the night before. One sweep of his foot and she was falling, twisting to catch herself, but not fast enough to avoid thudding her brow against a weather-smooth rock. She rolled, the gray sky looming, and tried to remember how to breathe as the impact echoed through her skull. Rowan pounced with fluid ease, his powerful thighs digging into her ribs as he straddled her. Breathless, head reeling, and muscles drained from a morning in the kitchen and weeks of hardly eating, she couldn't twist and toss him, couldn't do anything. She was outweighed, outmuscled, and for the first time in her life, she realized she was utterly outmatched. "Shift," he hissed. She laughed up at him, a dead, wretched sound even to her own ears. "Nice try." Gods, her head throbbed. A warm trickle of blood was leaking from the right side of her brow, and he was now sitting on her chest. She laughed again, strangled by his weight. "You think you can trick me into shifting by pissing me off?" He snarled. Okay, see, this is... It's not okay. Like, I'm not having fun reading this, but, like, this compared to, like, the first time he attacked her is completely different, because this is actual training. The first time, not so much. But it's okay. Siblings fight all the time, so they'll be fine. He snarled, his face speckled with the stars floating in her vision. Every blink shot daggers of pain through her. It would probably be the worst black eye of her life. "Here's an idea. I'm rich as hell," she said over the pounding in her head. "How about we pretend to do this training for a week or so, and then you tell Maeve I'm good and ready to enter her territory, and I'll give you all the goddamn gold you want." Yeah, because they're related. He brought his canine so close to her neck that one movement would have him ripping out her throat. "Here's an idea," he growled. "I don't know what the hell you've been doing for 10 years. 10 years other than flouncing around and calling yourself an assassin, but I think you're used to getting your way. I think you have no control over yourself. No control and no discipline. Not the kind that counts, deep down. You are a child, and a spoiled one at that. And," he said, those green eyes holding nothing but distaste, "you're a coward." Oh, not the coward. Y'all, I know they're distantly related. I know, I was just joking. Oh, this time for real? Okay, bye, Sarah. Love you. Had her arms not been pinned, she would have clawed his face off right then. She struggled, trying every technique she'd ever learned to dislodge him, but he didn't move an inch. A low, nasty laugh. Don't like that word. He leaned closer still, that tattoo of his swimming in her muddled vision. "Coward. You're a coward who has run for 10 years while innocent people were burned and butchered," and she stopped hearing him. She just stopped. It was like being underwater again, like charging into Nehemiah's room and finding that beautiful body mutilated on the bed, like seeing Galen Ash River, beloved and brave, riding off into the sunset to the cheers of his people. She lay still, watching the churning clouds above, waiting for him to finish the words she couldn't hear, waiting for a blow she was fairly certain she wouldn't feel. "Get up," he said suddenly, and the word was bright and wide as he stood. "Get up." Get up. Cale had said that to her once, when pain and fear and grief had shoved her over an edge, but the edge she'd gone over the night Nehemiah had died, the night she'd gutted Archer, the day she'd told Cale that horrible truth. Cale had helped shove her over that edge. She was still on the fall down. There was no getting up, because there was no bottom. Powerful, rough hands under her shoulders, the world tilting and spinning, then that tattooed, snarling face in hers. Let him take her head between those massive hands and snap her neck. "Pathetic," he spat, releasing her. "Spineless and pathetic." For Nehemiah, she had to try. But when she reached in toward the place in her chest where that monster dwelled, she found only cobwebs and ashes. Damn. Selena's head was still reeling, and dried blood now itched down the side of her face. She didn't bother to wipe it off, or to really care about the black eye that she was positive had blossomed during the miles they'd hiked from the temple ruins and into the forested, but not back toward Mistward. She was swaying on her feet when Rowan drew a sword and a dagger and stopped at the edge of a grassy plateau, speckled with small hills. Not hills, barrows, the ancient tombs of lords and princes long dead, rolling to the other edge of the trees. There were dozens, each marked with a stone threshold and sealed iron door. And through the murky vision, the pounding headache, the hair on the back of her neck rose. The grassy mound seemed to breathe. And through the murky vision, the pounding headache, the hair on the back of her neck rose. The grassy mound seemed to breathe, to sleep. Iron doors, to keep the whites inside, locked with the treasure they'd stolen. They infiltrated the barrows and lurked there for eons, feeding on whatever unwitting fools dared to seek the gold within. Rowan inclined his head toward the barrows. I had planned to wait until you had some handle on your power. Planned to make you come at night, when the barrow whites are really something to behold. But consider this a favor, as there are few that will dare come out in the day. Walk through the mounds, face the whites, and make it to the other side of the field, Aelin, and we can go to Doranel whenever you wish. It was a trap. She knew that well enough. He had the gift of endless time and could play games that lasted centuries. Her impatience, her mortality, the fact that every heartbeat brought her closer to death was being used against her. To face the whites. The whites. Rowan's weapons gleamed, close enough to grab. He shrugged those powerful shoulders as he said, "You can either wait to earn back your steel, or you can enter as you are now." The flash of temper snapped her out of it long enough to say, "My bare hands are weapon enough." He just gave a taunting grin and sauntered into the maze of hills. She trailed him closely, following him around each mound, knowing that if she fell too far behind, he'd leave her out of spite. Steady breathing and the yawns of awakening things arose beyond those iron doors. They were bolted into the stone lintels with spikes and nails that were so old they probably predated Wendlin itself. Her footsteps crunched in the grass. Even the birds and insects did not utter a too loud sound here. The hills parted to reveal an inner circle of dead grass around the most crumbling barrow of all. Where the others were rounded, this one looked as if some ancient god had stepped on it. Its flattened top had been overrun with the gnarled roots of bushes. The 3 massive stones of the threshold were beaten, stained, and askew. The iron door was gone. There was only blackness within. Ageless, breathing blackness. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as the darkness reached for her. "I leave you here," Rowan said. He hadn't set one foot inside the circle, his boots just an inch shy of the dead grass. His smile turned feral. "I'll meet you on the other side of the field." He expected her to bolt like a hare, and she wanted to. God's this place. That damned barrow, only 100 yards away, made her want to run and not stop until she found a place where the sun shone day and night. But if she did this, then she could go to Doranel tomorrow, and those whites waiting on the other half of the field, they couldn't be worse than what she'd already seen and fought and found dwelling in the world and inside of herself. So she inclined her head to Rowan and walked onto the dead field. You remind me of Flora from Weeks. Thank you. Chapter 14. Each step toward the central mound had Selena's blood roaring. The darkness between the stained ancient stones grew, swirling. It was colder, too. Cold and dry. She wouldn't stop, not with Rowan still watching, not when she had so much to do. She didn't dare look too long toward the open doorway and the thing lurking beyond. A lingering shred of pride, stupid, mortal pride, kept her from bolting through the rest of the field. Running, she remembered, only attracted some predators. So she kept her steps slow and called on every bit of training she'd had, even as the white slunk closer to the threshold, no more than a ripple of ravenous hunger encased in rags. Yet the white remained within its mound, even as she came near enough to drag into the barrow, as if it were hesitating. She was just passing the barrow when a pulsing, stale bit of air pushed against her ears. Maybe running was a good idea, If magic was the only weapon against whites, then her hands would be useless. Still, the white lingered beyond the threshold. The strange, dead air pushed against her ears again, a high-pitched ringing wending itself into her head. She hurried, grass crunching as she gathered every detail she could to wield against whatever assailant lurked nearby. The treetops swayed in the misty breeze on the other end of the field. It wasn't far. Selena passed the central mound, cracking her jaw against the ringing in her ears, worse and worse with each step. Even the white cringed away. It hadn't been hesitating because of her, or Rowan. The circle of dead grass ended a few steps away. Just a few, and then she could run from whatever it was that could make a white tremble in fear. And then she saw him, the man standing behind the barrow. The fuck? What book? Air of Fire, Throne of Glass. Not a white. She glimpsed only a flash of pale skin, night dark hair, unfathomable beauty, and an onyx torque around his strong column of a neck. Okay, hold on. Who is this? And blackness, a wave of it slamming down on her. Not oblivion, but actual dark, as if he'd thrown a blanket over the two of them. Was this Azrael? I know it's not Azrael, but it sounds like. Is he a shadow singer? The ground felt grassy, but she couldn't see it. Couldn't see anything. Not beyond, not to the side, not behind. There was only her and the swirling black. Selena crouched, biting down on a curse as she scanned the dark. Whatever he was, despite his shape, he wasn't mortal. In his perfection, in those depthless eyes, there was nothing human. We don't simp for him? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Blood tickled her upper lip, a nosebleed. The pounding in her ears began to drown out her thoughts, any plan, as if her body were repulsed by the very essence of whatever this thing was. The darkness remained, impenetrable, unending. Stop. Breathe. But someone was breathing behind her. Was it the man or something else? The breathing was louder, closer. Ooh, I just got the chills! And a chill air brushed her nose, her lips, licking along her skin. Running was smarter than just waiting. She took several bounding steps that should have taken her toward the edge of the field, but nothing. Only endless black and the breathing thing that was closer. Reeking of dust and carrion, and another scent. Something she hadn't smelled for a lifetime but could never forget. Not when it had been coating that room like paint. Oh, gods. Breath on her neck, snaking up the shell of her ear. She whirled, drawing in what might very well be her last breath, and the world flashed bright. Not with clouds and dead grass, not with a fey prince waiting nearby. The room. This room. The servant woman was screaming like a tea kettle. There were puddles just inside the shut windows. Windows Selena herself had sealed the night before when they'd been flapping in the swift and sudden storm. She had thought the bed was wet because of rain. She'd climbed in because the storm had made her hear such horrible things, made her feel like there was something wrong, like there was someone standing in the corner of her room. It was not rain soaking the bed in that elegantly rugged chamber at the country manor. It was not rain that had dried on her hands and skin and nightgown. And that smell, not just blood, but something else. This is not real, Selena said aloud, backing away from the bed on which she was standing like a ghost. This is not real. But there were her parents, sprawled on the bed, their throats sliced ear to ear. There was her father, broad-shouldered and handsome, his skin already gray. There was her mother, her golden hair matted with blood, her face slaughtered like animals. The wounds were so vulgar, so gaping and deep, and her parents looked so... Selena vomited. She fell to her knees, her bladder loosening just before she vomited a second time. This is not real, she gasped, as a wet warmth soaked her pants. Oh my god, I don't like this at all. This is just like when Nesta peed herself whenever that thing came out of the lake. And it's just something about seeing someone that you thought was so strong be so weak that it just like tears my soul apart. She couldn't breathe, and then she was pushing to her feet, bolting away from that room, toward the wood-paneled walls, through them like a wraith herself, until another bedroom, another body. Oh no. Are we gonna see? No. If she sees Sam, it's over for me. Another body, Nehemiah. Oh, carved up, mutilated, violated, and broken. The thing lurking behind her slid a hand over her waist, along her abdomen, pulling her back against its chest with a lover's gentleness. Panic surged, so strong that she slammed her elbow back and up, hitting what felt like flesh and bone. It hissed, releasing her. That was all she needed. She ran, treading through the illusion of her friend's blood and organs, and then watery sunlight and dead grass, and a heavily armed, silver-haired warrior whom she'd sprinted toward, not caring about the vomit on her clothes, her soiled pants, the gasping, shrieking noise coming out of her throat. She ran until she reached him and fell to the green grass, gripping it, shredding it, retching even though she had nothing left in her but a trickle of bile. She was screaming, or sobbing, or not making any sound at all. Then she felt the shift and the surge, a well opening beneath her stomach and filling with burning, relentless fire. No, no. Agony cleaved her in a pulse, her vision jumping between crystal clarity and the muted eyesight of mortals, her teeth aching as the fangs punched out and retracted, ebb and flow, immortal and mortal, mortal and immortal, shifting as fast as a hummingbird's flapping wings. With each shift, the well deepened, the wildfire rising and falling and reaching up, up. She really did scream then, because her throat burned, or maybe that was the magic coming out, at last unleashed. Magic. Selena awoke under the canopy of the forest. It was still daylight, and from the dirt on her shirt and pants and boots, it seemed like Rowan had dragged her here from the barrows. There was vomit on her shirt and pants, and then she'd wet herself. Her face heated, but she shoved away the thoughts about why she had pissed herself, why she had hurled her guts up, and that last thought about magic. No discipline, no control, and no courage. Came a growling voice. Okay, can he, ease up on her a little bit? I get that it's, enemies to lovers, and he's got to go hard on her to get her to where she needs to be, but, this bitch just pissed her pants. Can we slow down? Head throbbing, she found Rowan sitting on a rock, his muscular arms braced on his knees. A dagger hung from his left hand, as if he'd been idly tossing the damn thing in the air while she lay in her own filth. You failed, he said flatly. You made it to the other side of the field, but I said to face the whites, not throw a magical tantrum. I will kill you, she said, the words raw and gasping. How dare... That was not a white, princess. He flicked his attention toward the trees beyond her. She might have roared about using specifics to escape his bargain to bring her to Dornell, but when his eyes met hers again, he seemed to say that things should not have been there. Then what in the hell was it, you stupid bastard? She silently shot back. He clenched his jaw before he said aloud, I don't know. We've had skinwalkers on the prowl for weeks. Oh, y'all did not just make me say that word aloud. Oh my god. Y'all did not just make me say that word aloud. Ah! No, stop. Oh, I'm never saying that word. Oh, just saying it freaks me out. I know it's not the walker that we know here, but even just saying that word aloud, it freaks me out. Ugh. Roaming down from the hills to search for human pelts, but this was something different. I've never encountered its like, not in these lands or any other. Thanks to having to drag you away, I don't think I'll learn anytime soon. He gave a pointed look at her current state. It was gone when I circled back. Tell me what happened. I only saw darkness, and when you emerged, you were different. She dared to look at herself again. Her skin was bone white, as if the little color she'd received lying on those rooftops in Varese had been leached away, and not only by fright and sickness. No, she said. And you can go to hell. Other lives might depend on it. I want to go back to the fortress, she breathed. She didn't want to know about the creatures or about the walkers or about any of it. Each word was an effort. Right now. You're done when I say you're done. You can kill me or torture me or throw me off of a cliff, but I am done for today. In that darkness, I saw things that no one should be able to see. It dragged me through my memories, and not the decent ones. Is that enough for you? He spat out a noise, but got to his feet and began walking. She staggered and stumbled, knees trembling, and kept moving after him, all the way into the halls of Mistward, where she angled her body so that none of the passing sentries or workers could see her soiled pants, the vomit. There was no hiding her face, though. She kept her attention on the prince until he opened a wooden door and a wall of steam hit her. "These are the female baths. Your room is a level up. Be in the kitchens at dawn tomorrow." And then he left her again. Selena trudged into the steamy chamber, not caring who was in there as she shucked off her clothes, collapsed into one of the sunken stone tubs, and did not stir for a long, long while. I'll just say walkers, and y'all will know what I'm talking about. I'll just say walkers. Chapter 15. Oh, we're back to Kale! Y'all. I keep going back and forth with him. Chapter 15. Kale wasn't at all surprised that his father was 20 minutes late to their meeting, nor was he surprised when his father strode into Kale's office, slid into the chair opposite his desk, and offered no explanation for his tardiness. Hold on. With calculated cool and distaste, he surveyed the office. No windows, no worn rug, an open trunk of discarded weapons that Kale had never found the time to polish or send for repairs. At least it was organized. The few papers on his desk were stacked. His glass pens were in their proper holders. His suit of armor, which he rarely had occasion to wear, gleamed from its dummy in the corner. His father said at last, "This is what our illustrious king gives the captain of his guard?" Kale shrugged, and his father studied the heavy oak desk, a desk he'd inherited from his predecessor, and one on which he and Selena had... Come on now. He shut down the memory before it could boil his blood, and instead smiled at his father. There was a larger office available in the glass edition, but I wanted to be accessible to my men. It was the truth. He also hadn't wanted to be anywhere near the administrative wing of the castle, sharing a hallway with courtiers and councilmen. A wise decision. His father leaned back in the ancient wooden chair. A leader's instincts. Kale pinned him with a long stare. "I'm to return to Anil with you. I'm surprised you waste your breath on flattery." "Is that so? From what I've seen, you've been making no move to prepare for this so-called return. You're not even looking for a replacement." "Despite your low opinion of my position, it's one I take seriously. I won't have just anyone looking after this palace. You haven't even told His Majesty that you're leaving." That pleasant, dead smile remained on his father's face. "When I begged for my leave next week, the king made no mention of you accompanying me. Rather than land you in hot water, boy, I held my tongue." Kale kept his face bland, neutral. "Again, I'm not leaving until I find a proper replacement. It's why I asked you to meet me here. I need time." It was true. Partially, at least. Just as he had for the past few nights, Kale had dropped by Adian's party, another tavern, even more expensive, even more packed. Adian wasn't there again. Somehow everyone thought the general was there, and even the courtesan who'd left with him the first night said the general had given her a gold coin, without utilizing her services, and gone off to find more sparkling wine. Kale had stood on the street corner where the courtesan said she'd left him, but found nothing. And wasn't it fascinating that no one really seemed to know exactly when the Bane would arrive, or where they were currently camped, only that they were on their way. Kale was too busy during the day to track Adian down, and during the king's various meetings and luncheons, confronting the general was impossible. But tonight he planned to arrive at the party early enough to see if Adian even showed and where he slipped off to. The sooner he could get something on Adian, the sooner he could settle all this nonsense and keep the king from looking too long in his direction before he turned in his resignation. He'd only called this meeting because of a thought that had awoken him in the middle of the night. A slightly insane, highly dangerous plan that would likely get him killed before it even accomplished anything. He'd skimmed through all those books Selena had found on magic, and found nothing at all about how he might help Dorian and Selena by freeing it. But Selena had once told him that the rebel group Archer and Nehemiah had run claimed two things. One, that they knew where Aelin Galathinius was, and two, that they were close to finding a way to break the king of Ardalan's mysterious power over the continent. The first one was a lie, of course, but if there was the slightest chance that these rebels knew how to free magic, he had to take it. He was already going to Trail 80, and he'd seen all of Selena's notes about the rebel hideouts, so he had an idea of where they could be found. This would have to be dealt with carefully, and he still needed as much time as he could buy. His father's dead smile faded, and true steel, honed by decades of ruling Anil, shone through. Rumor has it you consider yourself a man of honor, though I wonder what manner of man you truly are if you do not honor your bargains. I wonder. His father made a good show of chewing on his bottom lip. I wonder what your motive was, then, in sending your woman to Wendelin. Cale fought the urge to stiffen. For the noble Captain Westfall, there would be no question that he truly wanted His Majesty's champion to dispatch our foreign enemies. Yet for the oath-breaker, the liar, I'm not breaking my vow to you, Cale said, meaning every word. I intend to go to Anil. I will swear that in any temple before any god, but only when I found a replacement. You swore a month, his father growled. You're to have me for the rest of my damned life. What is a month or two more to you? His father's nostrils flared. What purpose, then, did his father have in wanting him to return so quickly? Cale was about to ask, itching to make his father squirm a bit, when an envelope landed on his desk. It had been years and years, but he still remembered his mother's handwriting, still recalled the elegant way in which she drew his name. What is this? Your mother sent a letter to you. I suppose she's expressing her joy in your anticipated return. Cale didn't touch the envelope. Aren't you going to read it? I have nothing to say to her, and no interest in what she has to say to me. Cale lied. Another trap, another way to unnerve him. But he had so much to do here, so many things to learn and uncover. He'd honor his vow soon enough. His father snatched back the letter, tucking it into his tunic. She'll be most saddened to hear that. And he knew his father, well aware of Cale's lie, would tell his mother exactly what he'd said. For a heartbeat, his blood roared in his ears, the way it always had when he'd witnessed his father belittling his mother, reprimanding her, ignoring her. He took a steadying breath. 4 months, then I'll go. Set the date and it'll be done. 2 months. 3. A slow smile. I could go to the king right now and ask for your dismissal instead of waiting 3 months. Cale clenched his jaw. Name your price, then. Oh, there's no price. But I think I like the idea of you owing me a favor. That dead smile returned. I like that idea very much. 2 months, boy. They didn't bother with goodbyes. Damn. Hi, Lexi. His father's a bitch. Sorcha? Sorcha's back? Sorcha was called up to the Crown Prince's chambers just as she was settling in to brew a calming tonic for an overworked kitchen girl. Stop. Stop! Oh my god. And though she tried not to seem too eager and pathetic, she found a way to very, very quickly dump the task onto one of the lower-level apprentices and make the trek to the prince's tower. Ah! Stop! She's so cute. She'd never been here, but she knew where it was. All the healers did, just in case. The guards let her pass with hardly a nod, and by the time she'd ascended the spiral staircase, the door to his chambers was already open. A mess. His rooms were a mess of books and papers and discarded weapons, and there, sitting at a table with hardly a foot of space cleared for him, was Dorian, looking rather embarrassed, either at the mess or at his split lip. She managed to bow, even as that traitor... Oh, stop! They're so cute! They're so cute. She's so cute! The only little sliver of happiness that I have right now is this bitch and her crush on Dorian. Ah! Nobody better touch her. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, she managed to bow, even as that traitorous heat flooded her again, up her neck and across her face. Your Highness summoned me? A cleared throat. I think you can see what needs repairing. Another injury to his hand. This one looked like it was from sparring, but the lip, getting that close to him would be an effort of will. Hand first, then let that distract her, anchor her. She set down her basket of supplies and lost herself in the work of readying ointments and bandages. His scented soap caressed her nose, strong enough to suggest he just bathed, which was a horrible thing to think about as she stood beside his chair, because she was a professional healer, and imagining her patients naked was not a... "Aren't you going to ask what happened?" the prince said, peering up at her. "It's not my place to ask, and unless it's relevant to the injury, it's nothing I need to know." It came out colder, harder than she meant, but it was true. Efficiently, she patched up his hand. The silence didn't bother her. She'd sometimes spent days in the catacombs without speaking to anyone. She'd been a quiet child before her parents had died, and after the massacre in the city square, she'd become even more so. It wasn't until she'd come to the castle that she found friends. Found that she sometimes liked talking. Yet now, with him, well, it seemed that the prince didn't like silence, because he looked up at her again and said, "Where are you from?" Such a tricky question to answer, since the how and why of her journey to this castle were stained by the actions of his father. "Fenharrow," she said, praying that would be the end of it. "Where in Fenharrow?" She almost cringed, but she had more self-control than that after 5 years of tending gruesome injuries and knowing that one flicker of disgust or fear on her face could shatter a patient's control. "A small village in the south. Most people have never heard of it." "Fenharrow is beautiful," he said. All that open land, stretching on forever. She didn't remember enough of it to recall whether she had loved the flat expanse of farmland, bordered on the west by mountains and on the east by the sea. "Did you always want to be a healer?" "Yes," she said, because she was entrusted to heal the heir to the empire and could show nothing but absolute certainty. A slash of a grin. Liar. She didn't mean to, but she met his gaze. Those sapphire eyes. Ah! Stop! They're so cute! Stop! So bright in the late afternoon sun streaming through the small window. "I didn't mean any offense. I'm crying." He tested the bandages. "I was trying to distract myself." She nodded. Because she had nothing to say and could never come up with anything clever anyway, she drew out her tin of disinfecting salve. "For your lip, if you don't mind, Your Highness. I want to make sure there's no dirt or anything in the wound, so it... Sorsja." She tried not to let it show what it did to her to have him remember her name. Oh my god. I will take any crumbs I can get at this point. Oh my god! No, I crinkled some of my pages. Ah! She tried not to let it show what it did to her to have him remember her name, or to hear him say it. "Do what you need to." She bit her lip, a stupid, nervous habit, and nodded as she tilted his chin up so she could better see his mouth. His skin was so warm. She touched the wound and he hissed, his breath caressing her fingers, but didn't pull back or reprimand or strike her as some of the other courtiers did. She applied the salve to his lip as quickly as she could. God, his lips were soft. His lips are soft! Of course they are, bitch! Oh my god! She hadn't known he was the prince the day she first saw him, striding through the gardens, the captain in tow. They were barely into their teenage years, and she was an apprentice in hand-me-down clothes, but for a moment, he looked at her and smiled. He'd seen her when no one else had for years. So she found it... Honey, he's a hoe. Who's gonna tell her that he's a hoe? He'd be smiling at anybody. So she found excuses to be in the upper levels of the castle. She'd wept the next month when she spied him again, and 2 apprentices had whispered about how handsome their prince was. Dorian, heir to the throne. It had been secret and stupid, this infatuation with him, because when she finally encountered him again, years later, after helping Amethy with a patient, he didn't look at her. She had become invisible, like many of the healers. Invisible, just as she had wanted. Sorsja? Her horror achieved new depths as she realized she'd been staring at his mouth, fingers still in her tin of salve. "I'm sorry," she said, wondering whether she should throw herself from the tower and end her humiliation. Stop! She's so cute! It's been a long day. It wasn't a lie. She was acting like a fool. She'd been with a man before, one of the guards, just once, and long enough to know she wasn't particularly interested in letting another one touch her anytime soon. But standing so close, his legs brushing the skirt of her brown homespun dress. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked quietly. "About me and my friends." She backed away a step, but held his stare, even though training and instinct told her to avert his eyes. "You were never cruel to the healers, to anyone. I like to think the world needs..." Saying that was too much, because the world was his father's world. "Needs better people," he finished for her, standing. And you think my father would have used your knowledge of our comings and goings against us. So he knew that Amethy reported anything unusual. Amethy had told Sorstra to do the same, if she knew what was good for her. Don't call my boy out like that. He is a hoe! It's just the truth! I don't mean to imply that His Majesty would... Does your village still exist? Are your parents still alive? Even years later, she couldn't keep the pain from her voice as she said, no, it was burned. And no, they brought me to Rifthold and were killed in the city's immigrant purge. A shadow of grief and horror in his eyes. So why would you ever come here, work here? She gathered her supplies. Because I had nowhere else to go. Agony flickered on his face. Your Highness, have I... But he was staring as if he understood and saw her. I'm sorry. It wasn't your decision, or your soldiers who rounded up my parents. He only looked at her for a long moment before thanking her. A polite dismissal. And she wished, as she left that cluttered tower, she'd never opened her mouth, because perhaps he'd never call on her again for the sheer awkwardness of it. She wouldn't lose her position because he wasn't that cruel, but if he refused her services, then it might lead to questions. So Sorstra resolved, as she lay that night in her little cot, to find a way to apologize, or maybe find excuses to keep the prince from seeing her again. Tomorrow. She'd figure it out tomorrow. The following day, she didn't expect the messenger who arrived after breakfast, asking for the name of her village, and when she hesitated, he said that the crown prince wanted to know. Wanted to know, so he could have it added to his personal map of the continent. Oh my god. Yo. I love him so much. How do you get any better than him? How do you get any better than Dorian? He's a hoe, but he is the best kind. He's the best kind. Stop. How do you get any better than him? I love that man so much. He's it for me. Sorry, it's Sam and then Dorian. But like, for people that are alive, it's Dorian right now. Heir of Fire in the Throne of Glass. It's the third book, I think. Chapter 16. Of all the spaces in the Omega, the mess hall was by far the most dangerous. I want more Dorian and Sorstra. The 3 Iron Teeth clans had been divided into rotating shifts that kept them mostly separated. Training with the Wyverns, training in the weapons room, and training in mortal warfare. It was smart to separate them, Manon supposed, since tensions were high and would continue to run high until the Wyverns were selected. Everyone wanted a bull, though Manon fully expected to get one, perhaps even Titus. It didn't keep her from wanting to punch out the teeth of anyone who even whispered about coveting a bull of her own. There were only a few overlapping minutes between their 3-hour rotations, and the coven leaders did their best to keep them from running into each other. At least Manon did. Her temper was on a tight leash these days, and one more sneer from the Yellowlegs heir was likely to end in bloodshed. The same could be said of her 13. 2 of whom, the green-eyed twins, Phaline and Fallon, were more demon than witch, had gotten into a brawl with some Yellowlegs idiots, unsurprisingly. She'd punished them just as she'd punished Astrin, 3 blows each, public and humiliating. But like clockwork, fights still broke out between other covens whenever they were in close quarters, which was what made the mess hall so deadly. The 2 daily meals were the only time they all shared together, and while they kept to their own tables, the tension was so thick Manon could slice it with her blade. Manon stood in line for her bowl of slop. That was the best name she could give the doughy goop the mess hall served, flanked by Astrin, with the last of the blue blood witches in the line ahead of her. Somehow, the blue bloods were always first in line for food, first to ride the wyverns. The 13 had yet to get airborne, and likely to get first pick of the beasts. A growl rumbled deep in her throat, but Manon pushed her tray along the table, watching the pale-faced server heap a grayish-white ball of food into the bowl of the blue blood in front of her. She didn't bother to note the details of his features as the thick vein in his throat pulsed. Witches didn't need blood to survive, but humans didn't need wine either. The blue bloods were picky about whose blood they drank. Virgins, young men, pretty girls, but the black beaks didn't particularly care one way or another. The man's ladle began shaking, tip-tapping along the side of the cauldron. "Rules are rules," drawled a voice to her left. Astrid let out a warning snarl, and Manon didn't have to look to know that the Yellowlegs' heir, Iskra, lurked there. "No eating the rabble," the dark-haired witch added, shoving her bowl in front of the man, cutting the line. Manon took in the iron nails and teeth, the calloused hands so blatantly making a show of dominance. "I was wondering why no one's bothered to eat you," Manon said. Iskra shouldered her way farther in front of Manon. Manon could feel the eyes in the room shifting toward them, but she reined in her temper, allowing the disrespect. Mess hall posturing meant nothing. "I hear your 13 are taking to the air today," said the Yellowlegs' heir as Manon received her own rations. "What business is it of yours?" Iskra shrugged her toned shoulders. "They say you were once the best flyer in all 3 clans. It would be a shame if it were just more gossip." It was true. She'd earned her spot as coven leader as much as she'd inherited it. Iskra went on, sliding her plate along the next server, who spooned some pale root vegetable on her slop. "There's talk of skipping our training rotation so we can see the legendary 13 take to the skies for the first time in a decade." Manon clicked her tongue in pretend thought. "I also heard there's talk that the Yellowlegs need all the help they can get in the sparring room, but I suppose any army needs its supply drivers." A low laugh from Astrid, and Iskra's brown eyes flashed. They reached the end of the serving table, where Iskra faced Manon. With their trays in hand, neither could reach for the blades at their sides. The room had gone silent. Even the high table at which the 3 matrons sat. The fuck? Manon's gums stung as her iron teeth shot from their slits and snapped down. She said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "Anytime you need a lesson in combat, Iskra, you just let me know. I'd be happy to teach you a few things about soldiering." Before the heir could reply, Manon stalked across the room. Astrid gave Iskra a mocking bow of the head, followed by identical gestures from the rest of her 13, but Iskra remained staring at Manon, simmering. Manon plunked down at her table to find her grandmother smiling faintly, and when all of Manon's 12 sentinels were seated around her, 13 from now until the darkness embraced them, Manon allowed herself a smile too. They were going to fly today. As if the open cliff face weren't enough to make the 2 gathered Blackbeak covens shift on their feet, the 26 tethered wyverns in a tight space, none of them that docile, made even Manon twitchy. But she showed no fear as she approached the wyvern at the center. 2 lines of 13 stood chained and ready. The 13 took the first, The other coven took one behind. Manon's new riding gear was heavy and awkward, leather and fur, capped with steel shoulder guards and leather wrist braces, more than she was used to wearing, especially with her red cloak. They'd already practiced saddling the mounts for 2 days, though they'd usually have handlers around to do it for them. Manon's mount for the day, a small female, was lying on her belly, low enough that Manon easily climbed her hind leg and hauled herself into the saddle at the spot where the long neck met the massive shoulder. Wait, why did I think wyverns were brooms? This is a living thing? Is this like a dragon? Wait, what? Breakfast had been bad enough. Coming close to a human throat now would only tempt her further. The wyvern shifted, its body warm against her cold legs, and Manon tightened her gloved grip on the reins. Down the line, her sentinels mounted their beasts. Astrid was ready, of course, her cousin's gold hair tightly braided back, her fur collar ruffling in the biting wind from the open drop ahead of them. She flashed Manon a grin, her dark gold-flecked eyes bright. Not a trace of fear, just the thrill. Oh, they're dragons. Dragons without the fire breathing. Oh. Cool. The beasts knew what to do, the handlers had said. They knew how to make the crossing on instinct alone. That's what they called the sheer plunge between the two mountain peaks, the final test for a rider and mount. If the wyverns couldn't make it, they'd splatter on the far rocks below with their riders. Ooh. There was movement on the viewing platforms on either side, and the Yellowlegs heir coven swaggered in, all of them smiling, none more broadly than Iskra. The chickens of the dragon universe. Think Drogon, Game of Thrones, but with spikes in their tails. Like that big? Oh, damn. Bitch, Astrid murmured, as if it weren't bad enough that Mother Blackbeak stood on the opposite viewing platform, flanked by the other two high witches. Manon lifted her chin and looked to the drop ahead. Just like we practiced, the overseer said, climbing from the open-faced pit to the viewing platform where the three matrons stood. Hard kick in the side sent him off. Let him navigate the crossing. Best advice is to hold on like hell and enjoy the ride. A few nervous laughs from the coven behind her, but the 13 remained silent, waiting, just as they would faced with any army before any battle. Manon blinked, the muscles behind her golden eyes pulling down to clear film that would shield her vision from the wind. Manon allowed herself a moment to adjust to the thickness of the extra lid. Without it, they'd fly like mortals, squinting and streaming tears all over the place. Ready at your command, lady, a man called to her. Manon studied the open gap ahead, the bridge barely visible above, the gray skies in mist. She looked down the line, to each of the 6 faces on either side, then turned ahead, to the drop in the world waiting beyond. We are the 13, from now until the darkness claims us, she said it quietly, but knew all could hear her. Let's remind them why. Manon kicked her mount into action, 3 galloping, thunderous steps beneath her, surging forward, a leap into the freezing air, the clouds and the bridge and the snow all around, and then the drop. Her stomach shot right into her throat as the wyvern arced and angled down, wings tucked in tight. As she'd been instructed, Manon rose into a crouch over the neck, keeping her face close to the leathery skin, the wind screaming in her face. The air rippled behind her, her 13 mere feet away, falling as one, past rock and snow, shooting for the earth. Manon gritted her teeth, the blur of stone, the kiss of mist, her hair ripping out of her braid, waving like a white banner above her. The mist parted, and darkness embraced her. There was the gap floor, so close, and Manon held on to the saddle, to the reins, to conscious thought as massive wings spread and the world tilted, and the body beneath her flipped up, riding the wind's current in a sheer climb along the side of the northern fang. There were triumphant howls from below, from above, and the wyvern kept climbing, swifter than Manon had ever flown on her broom, past the bridge and up into the open sky. That fast, Manon was back in the skies. The cloudless, endless, eternal sky held them as Astrid and Sorel and Vesta flanked her. Then the rest of the 13, and Manon schooled her face into cool victory. To her right, Astrid was beaming, her iron teeth shining like silver. To her left, red-haired Vesta was just shaking her head, gaping at the mountains below. Sorel was stone-faced as Manon, but her black eyes danced. The 13 were airborne again. The world spread beneath them, and ahead, far to the west, was the home they would someday reclaim. But now, the wind caressed and sang to her, telling her of its currents, more an instinct than a magical gift, an instinct that had made her the best flyer in all 3 clans. What now? Astrid called, and though she'd never seen any of her 13 cry, Manon could have sworn there were tears shining in the corners of her cousin's eyes. I say we test them out, Manon said, keeping that wild exuberance locked up tight and in her chest, and reined her mount toward where the first canyon run awaited them. The whoops and cackles of her 13 as they rode the current were funnier than any mortal music. Manon stood at attention in her grandmother's small room, staring at the far stone wall until she was spoken to. Mother Blackbeak sat at the wooden desk, her back to Manon as she pored over some document or letter. You did well today, Manon, her grandmother said at last. Manon touched 2 fingers to her brow. though her grandmother still studied the papers. Manon hadn't needed to be told by the overseer that it was the best crossing he had witnessed to date. She'd taken one look at the empty platform where the Yellowlegs coven had been and known they'd left as soon as Manon didn't splatter on the ground. "You're 13, and all the Blackbeak covens did well," her grandmother went on. "Your work in keeping them disciplined these years is commendable." Manon's chest swelled, but she said, "It's my honor to serve you, grandmother." Her grandmother scribbled something down. "I want you and the 13 to be wing leader. I want you leading all of the clans." The witch twisted to look at Manon, her face unreadable. "There are to be war games in a few months to decide the ranks. I don't care how you do it, but I expect to crown you victor." Manon didn't need to ask why. Her grandmother's eyes fell on Manon's red cloak, and she smiled faintly. "We don't yet know who our enemies will be, but once we're done with the King's War and reclaim the wastes, it will not be a blue blood or Yellowlegs sitting on the Iron Teeth throne. Understand? Become wing leader, command the Iron Teeth armies, and keep control of those armies once the matrons eventually turned on one another." Manon nodded. "It would be done. I suspect the other matrons will give similar orders to their heirs. Make sure your second keeps close to you." Astrid was already outside, guarding the door, but Manon said, "I can look after myself." Her grandmother hissed. Baba Yellowlegs was 700 years old. She tore down the walls of the Crochan capital with her bare hands, and yet someone slipped into her wagon and murdered her. Even if you live to be 1,000, you'll be lucky to be half the witch she was. Manon kept her chin high. "Watch your back. I will not be pleased if I have to find myself another heir." Manon bowed her head. "As you will it, grandmother." Chapter 17. I think this is our last one. Yeah, I think this is our last one. Chapter 17. Selena hold on, I need water. Ugh. Selena awoke, freezing and groaning from a relentless headache, that she knew was from hitting her head on the temple stones. She hissed as she sat up, and every inch of her body, from her ears to her toes to her teeth, gave a collective burst of pain. It felt as if she'd been pummeled by 1,000 iron fists and left to rot in the cold. That was from the uncontrolled shifting she'd done yesterday. The gods knew how many times she'd shuddered between one form and the other. From the tenderness in her muscles, it had to have been dozens. But she hadn't lost control of the magic. She reminded herself as she rose, gripping the chipped bedpost. She pulled the pale robe tighter around her as she shuffled for the dresser and basin. After the bath, she realized she had nothing to change into and had stolen one of the many robes, leaving her reeking clothes heaped by the door. She'd barely made it to her room before she collapsed on the bed, pulled the scrap of blanket over her, and slept. Oh, it's up to 17? We're reading through 16 only? I mean, we can read 17. Does 17 end with a cliffhanger? Two, three, four. It's only 4 pages. I don't remember how many chapters I was supposed to read today. And Sarah usually tells me, but Sarah's not here today. Ah! If 17 doesn't end on a cliffhanger, I'll just read it. Actually, no, I think that's... Let me check. Okay, Nico's gonna check. I'm helpless without Sarah. I was going to say something because something stood out to me. And I was going to say it. Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask, do we ever get to see who that was that, like, attacked Selena? When's the next live? Tomorrow. The beautiful boy that I'm not supposed to like. Do we ever get to see who he is? Or was he just, like, a one-time thing? You're good. Oh, okay, so through 17, not a cliffhanger. Okay, we'll read it. We'll read it. One more chapter wouldn't hurt. I haven't seen y'all in like a week, so I don't mind. And slept. Okay. And slept. And slept. She didn't feel like talking with anyone, and no one came for her anyway. Selena braced her hands on the dresser and grimaced at the reflection. She looked like shit. Felt like shit. Even more grim and gaunt than yesterday. She picked up the tin of salve Rowan had given her, but then decided he should see what he'd done. And she'd looked worse. 2 years ago, when Arabin had beaten her to a bloody pulp for disobeying his orders. This was nothing compared to how mangled she'd been then. She opened the door to find that someone had left clothes, the same as yesterday, but fresh. Her boots had been cleaned of mud and dust. Either Rowan had left them, or someone else had noticed her filthy clothing. God, she'd soiled herself in front of him. She didn't let herself wallow in the humiliation as she dressed and went to the kitchens, the halls dark in the moments before dawn. Already, Luca was prattling about the fighting knife a century had loaned him for his training, and on and on and on. Apparently, she had underestimated how horrific her face was, because Luca stopped his chattering and mid-sentence to swear. Whirling, Emrys took one look at her and dropped his earthenware bowl before the hearth. Great mother and all her children. Selena went to the heap of garlic cloves on the work table and picked up a knife. It looks worse than it feels. A lie. Her head was still pounding from the cut on her brow, and her eye was deeply bruised beneath. I've got some salve in my room. Luca started from where he was already washing dishes, but she gave him a long look. If something happens to them, I'm gonna riot. If something happens to them, I'm gonna be so pissed off. She began peeling the cloves, her fingers instantly sticky. They were still staring, so she flatly said, "It's none of your business." Emrys left his shattered bowl on the hearthstones and hobbled over, anger dancing in those bright eyes. "It's my business when you come into my kitchen." "I've been through worse," she said. Luca said, "What do you mean?" He eyed her mangled hands, her black eye, and the ring of scars around her neck, courtesy of Baba Yellowlegs. She silently invited him to do the calculations. A life in Ardalan with Fey blood. A life in Ardalan as a woman. His face paled. After a long moment, Emrys said, "Leave it alone, Luca," and stooped to pick up the fragments of the bowl. Selena went back to the garlic, Luca markedly quieter as he worked. Breakfast was made and spent upstairs in the same chaotic rush as yesterday, but a few more demi-fae noticed her today. She either ignored them or stared them down, marking their faces. Many had pointed ears, but most seemed human. Some wore civilian clothing, tunics and simple gowns, while the sentries wore light leather armor and heavy gray cloaks with an array of weapons, many the worse for wear. The warriors looked her way the most, men and women both, wariness and curiosity mingling. She was busy wiping down a copper pot when someone let out a low, appreciative whistle in her direction. Now that is one of the most glorious black eyes I've ever beheld. A tall old man, handsome despite being around Emery's age. Emery's age, strode through the kitchen, empty platter in his hands. "You leave her be too, Malachi," Emery said from the hearth. His husband, mate. The old man gave a dashing grin and set down the platter on the counter near Selena. "Rowan doesn't pull punches, does he?" His gray hair was cropped short enough to reveal his pointed ears, but his face was ruggedly human. "And it looks like you don't bother using a healing salve." She held his gaze but gave no reply. Malachi's grin faded. "My mate works too much as it is. You don't add to that burden, understand?" Emery scrawled his name, but Selena shrugged. I don't want to bother with any of you." Malachi caught the unspoken warning in her words. "So don't try to bother with me," and gave her a curt nod. She heard, more than saw, him stride to Emery's and kiss him, then the rumble of some murmured stern words, and then his steady footsteps as he walked out again. "Even the demi-fae warrior males push overprotective to a whole new level," Emery said, the word laced with forced lightness. "It's in our blood," Luca said, lifting his chin. "It's our duty, honor, and life's mission to make sure our families are cared for, especially our mates." "And it makes you a thorn in our side," Emery said. "Possessive, territorial beasts." The old man strode to the sink, setting down the cool kettle for Selena to wash. "My mate means well, lass, but you're a stranger, and from Ardalan, and you're training with someone none of us quite understand." Selena dumped his kettle in the sink. "I don't care," she said, and meant it. "Training was horrible that day. Not just because Rowan asked if she was going to vomit or piss herself again, but also because for hours, he made her sit amongst the temple ruins on the ridge, battered by the misty wind. He wanted her to shift. That was his only command. She demanded to know why he couldn't teach her the magic without shifting, and he gave her the same answer again and again. No shift, no magic lessons. But after yesterday, nothing short of him taking his long dagger and cutting her ears into points would get her to change forms. She tried once, when he stalked into the woods for some privacy. She tugged and yanked and pulled at whatever lay deep inside her, but got nothing. No flash of light or searing pain. So they sat on the mountainside. Selena froze to the bone. At least she didn't lose control again, no matter what insults he threw her way. Either aloud or through one of their silent, vicious conversations. She asked him why he wasn't pursuing the creature that had been in the Barrow Whites field, and he merely said that he was looking into it, and the rest was none of her concern. Thunderclouds clustered during the late afternoon. Rowan forced her to sit through the storm until her teeth were clattering in her skull, and her blood was thick with ice, and then they finally made the trek to the fortress. He ditched her by the baths again, eyes glimmering with an unspoken promise that tomorrow would be worse. When she finally emerged, there were dry clothes in her room, folded and placed with such care that she was starting to wonder whether she didn't have some invisible servant shadowing her. There was no way in hell an immortal like Rowan would have bothered to do that for a human. Why do I feel like that's exactly what he was doing? She debated staying in her rooms for the rest of the night, especially as rain lashed at her window, lightning illuminating the trees beyond, but her stomach gurgled. She was lightheaded again, and knew she'd been eating like an idiot. With her black eye, the best thing to do was eat, even if it meant going to the kitchens. She waited until she thought everyone had gone upstairs. There were always leftovers after breakfast. There had to be some at dinner. God, she was bone-tired, and ached even worse than she had this morning. She heard the voices long before she entered the kitchen, and almost turned back, but no one had spoken to her at breakfast save Malachi. Surely everyone would ignore her now, too. She'd estimated a good number of people in the kitchen, but was still a bit surprised by how packed it was. Chairs and cushions had been dragged in, all facing the hearth, before which Emrys and Malachi sat, chatting with those gathered. There was food on every surface, as if dinner had been held in here. Keeping to the shadows atop the stairs, she observed them. The dining hall was spacious, if a bit cold. Why gather around the kitchen hearth? She didn't particularly care, not when she saw the food. She slipped in through the gathered crowd with practiced stealth and ease, filling up a plate with roast chicken, potatoes. Gosh, she was already sick of potatoes, and hot bread. Everyone was still chatting. Those who didn't have seats were standing against the counters or walls, laughing and sipping from their mugs of ale. The upper half of the kitchen door was open to let out the heat from all the bodies, the sound of rain filling the room like a drum. She caught a glimmer of movement outside, but when she looked, there was nothing there. Selena was about to slip back up the stairs when Malachi clapped his hands and everyone stopped talking. Selena paused again in the shadows of the stairwell. Smiles spread and people settled in. Seated on the floor in front of Emery's chair was Luca, a pretty young woman pressed to his side, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. Casually, but with enough of a grip to tell every other male in the room that she was his. Selena rolled her eyes, not at all surprised. Still, she caught the look Luca gave the girl, the mischief in his eyes that sent a pang of jealousy right through her. She'd looked at Cale with that same expression, but their relationship had never been as unburdened, and even if she hadn't ended things, it never would have been like that. The ring on her finger became a weight. Lightning flashed, revealing the grass and forest beyond. Seconds later, thunder shook the stones, triggering a few shrieks and laughs. Emrys cleared his throat, and every eye snapped to his lined face. The ancient hearth illuminated his silver hair, casting shadows throughout the room. Long ago, Emrys began, his voice weaving between the drumming rain and grumbling thunder and crackling fire. When there was no mortal king on Wendellin's throne, the fairies still walked among us. Some were good and fair. Some were prone to little mischiefs, and some were fouler and darker than the blackest night. Selena swallowed. These were the words that had been spoken in front of for thousands of years, spoken in kitchens like this one. Tradition. It was those wicked fairies, Emrys went on, the words resonating in every crack and crevice. that you always had to watch for on the ancient roads, or in the woods, or on nights like this, when you can hear the wind moaning your name. Oh, not that one, Luca groaned, but it wasn't heartfelt. Some of the others laughed, a bit nervously even. Someone else protested. I won't sleep for a week. Selena leaned against the stone wall, shoveling food down her throat as the old man wove his tale. The hair on her neck stood on end for the duration of it, and she could see every horrific moment of the story as clearly as if she had lived it. As Emery's finished his tale, thunder boomed, and even Selena flinched, almost upsetting her empty plate. There were some wary laughs, some taunts and gentle pushes. Selena frowned. If she'd heard this story, with the wretched creatures who delighted in skin sewing and bone crunching and lightning crisping, before traveling with Rowan, she never would have followed him, not in a million years. Rowan hadn't lit a single fire on the journey here, hadn't wanted to attract attention. From these sorts of creatures? He hadn't known what that thing was the day before in the barrows. And if an immortal didn't know, she used breathing exercises to calm her pounding heart. Still, she'd be lucky if she slept tonight. Though everyone else seemed to be waiting for the next story, Selena stood. As she turned to leave, she looked again to that half-open kitchen door, just to make sure there was nothing lurking outside. But it was not some fell creature who waited in the rain. A large, white-tailed hawk was perched in the shadows. It sat absolutely still, but the hawk's eyes, there was something strange about them. She'd seen that hawk before. It had watched her for days as she lazed on that rooftop in Varese, watched her drink and steal and doze and brawl. At least she now knew what Rowan's animal form was. What she didn't know was why he bothered to listen to these stories. Alentia. Emrys was extending a hand from where he sat before the hearth. Would you perhaps share a story from your lands? We'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear a tale, if you do us the honor. Selena kept her eyes on the old man as everyone turned to where she stood in the shadows. Not one of them offered a word of encouragement, save for Luca, who said, "Tell us." She had no right to tell those stories as if they were her own, and she could not remember them correctly, not as they had been told her at her bedside. She clamped down on the thought as hard as she could, shoving it back long enough to calmly say, "No, thank you," and walked away. No one came after her. She didn't give a damn what Rowan made of the whole thing. The whispers died with each step, and it wasn't until she'd shut the door to her freezing room and slid into her bed that she loosed a sigh. The rain stopped, the clouds cleared on a brisk wind, and through the window a patch of stars flickered above the tree line. She had no stories to tell. All the legends of Terracin were lost to her, and only fragments were strewn through her memories like rubble. She pulled her scrap of blanket higher and draped an arm over her eyes, shutting out the ever-watching stars. My love is so sad. She's so sad. I'm gonna beat up SJM for putting my girl through the ringer like this. It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair at all. My hair is back to brown, y'all. It's not red anymore, which is fine. I was gonna have it dyed back to brown anyway, but looking at it now, I'm like, because I wanted to do something with it before I went to Florida, but I'm like, this is fine. I think I can deal with this. Looking back at pictures of this hair. And I don't want to cut it because it's so long now. Do y'all remember when I first started my lives and it was like here? It's grown so much. I just fell asleep. Honestly, me too. It's 2 a.m. You're good, Brie. But honestly, me too. I always zone out whenever I'm reading sometimes, especially with like when it's like describing a room, or it's like moments like that where everything's just like super mellow. I zone out when I'm reading, and then I don't even remember what I read. So me too, girl, me too. Notes for, okay, this car has circled around this parking lot I don't know how many times. I might have to go soon. But what was I gonna say? I don't have any notes today except for I need Selena to catch a break. I just need her to catch a break. I don't even care if it's just boring. Like, I want her to have a break. I want her to be happy. I don't like Rowan. I don't like him. I don't like him, and I don't like his method of training. I'm sorry. I know that it's what Selena needs, and I know it's, you know, for the best for her, but I don't have to like it. So, I don't like him. And I don't like his methods. I don't like how he talks to her. I don't like how he treats her. I get that he's mad, and I get that Selena is kind of a coward. But that's my girl. Don't talk about her like that. He's not allowed to talk about her like that. What else? I didn't like him either at first. Yeah. I must say that at the beginning is a little bit meh. He grows on you. We'll see. We'll see. In my eyes, it's still, like, to pick from the men that are alive, it's Dorian. Sorry, it's Dorian. Dorian. For life. I love him so much. But he's gonna be with Sorscha. He grows on you. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see if he does. Dorian is baby. I love him so much. Like, literally, I can't wait to see him grow into more, like, into the man that he is supposed to become. Like, I love him. I love him so much. He's just everything that anyone should ever be. Like, he's thoughtful, and he's selfless, and he just goes above and beyond for everyone that he loves. Or is he? What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Or is he? Is he gonna be with Sorscha? He better be. I'm sorry, but I don't want him to be with anyone else now. Unless Sorscha dies. That's the only way I'll accept him being with someone else. Is if Sorscha dies. Bye! He has to be with her! Is he gonna be with me? No, girl, he's gonna be with me. He's gonna be with me. Oh. I love him. I love him so much. Honestly. I guess we'll see. Oh, girl. Oh, y'all! I wanted to show something off to y'all. Okay, so I bought some Oracle cards. I'm a whore for Oracle decks, right? I bought a, okay, oh my god, words. I bought a low-key Oracle deck to commune. Oh, so we're gonna fight. Oh, yeah, time and place. I'll be there, and I will fight for my man Dorian. How do you feel about Manon? I love Manon. Her chapters are a bit boring because it's still building her character up and, like, building her stories up. How many chapters did we read? We read from 14 through 7, 14, 15, 16, 17. I think we read 4 chapters today. You can fight over Dorian. I'll take Azriel. Did you see that book talk, or that filter on TikTok shows him to be mine? Yeah. Sorry. He's spoken for. Sorry. Yeah, girl. It's in the bag for me. Anyway, I bought these Oracle cards to commune with Loki better. Okay, right? And they're so pretty. And they have, like, fucking open it. And they have, like, the meanings on the cards. They're so cute, right? They're so cute, right? I did my first reading with him last night. Or, like, I was channeling him. And I attempted to do my first reading with him, and it went actually pretty good. It was a really good reading, and it was very insightful, and I was very happy with the way things were. Anyway, and so I bought some crystals the other day, and I bought an HoF bracelet. I went to a Mexican shop, and I bought this. So these bracelets are made in a pueblo, I think, in Mexico. And I bought this, and I bought an HoF bracelet that had green on it for Loki, right? Tell me why half of my crystals and my HoF bracelet just disappeared. They're gone. I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are. And I'm 100% Loki took them, and he's messing with me. Because they're gone. Like, they were on my bed. I go back in, and half of them are gone. Gone. I was looking at that during the live when you moved your hand. Yeah. I don't know what pueblo makes this. I know it's like indigenous, like an indigenous group that lives I don't know the word for it. that makes them. And so it was kind of expensive. It was $14, but it is like from them. Material girl. Yes, he took them. He said, bye, girl. No, literally. I was so mad looking for them last night. I found like half of them. The other half is still gone. My HoF bracelet is gone. He asked me to light a candle for him last night, and I did, and I don't know if I did it wrong, and he's mad at me, so he's taking my things or what. But it's probably just, you know, Loki being Loki. So we'll see. We shall see. I think he's mad at me because I didn't wear his necklace yesterday. I forgot to put it on, and I didn't have it on all day yesterday, and so I put it on today. So hopefully he's not mad at me anymore. But I don't know. It's I never know. Anyway, yeah. So we shall see if I find them. If not, then I'm gonna be very sad. But yeah, we will go live again tomorrow. My only notes for today is that Dorian and Sorsha endgame. Manon is a bad bitch, and she's gonna kick Iskra's ass. Selena needs a break. I don't like Rowan. Couldn't even remember his fucking name. Don't like him. And yeah, I think that's it. Okay, when's the next live? Tomorrow. I'll see y'all tomorrow, and we will read, I don't know what chapters we're reading, but I'll schedule it and it'll have it in the title. If you had to pair Manon with someone, who would you pick? Just out of curiosity. I feel like that's not just out of curiosity though, and she's definitely gonna end up with someone. If I had to pair Manon with anyone, I don't know. I feel like no one really is on that same level with her, you know? Will the live be at the same hour? Yes, it will. I don't think anyone is at par with Manon right now. I know that her and Titus are like, or well, Titus is like trying to get at her, but I don't think they're gonna work out. And like, if I had to pair someone that, is it someone that we already, Kale? I think he's the only one that could really handle her. But Kale is too judgmental to be with her. Dorian, but she would eat Dorian alive. She would just eat him up and spit him out, spit out his little brittle bones, Like, those are the only men I know. Kale's father. I don't know. Oh wait, Titus is the river. You're right. Oh my god. No, you're right. His little bones. No, literally. Like, yeah. No, I know. I don't know why I said it like that. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry. I take it back. I misspoke. I misspoke. My brain is somewhere else. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Titus is an animal, so. Whoop. But yeah, I can't picture her with any of the people that we know currently. Yeah, the only one I could see handling her if he manages to get past his being judgmental phase is Kale. Dorian, no. No one. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't. Yeah, my brain was. Anyway. Are we talking about Manon? Yes. That's also, yeah, I just see Manon as like being single for the rest of the series, but like being happy about it, because she's her own woman, she's her own person, and she does not need anybody to look after her. So yeah, that's it. I see her with herself. A Sue Sylvester, if you will, marrying herself. That's how I see her. But anyway, yeah. I will see y'all tomorrow. And why do I feel like y'all are leaving cryptic comments, and it's making me think that she's gonna end up with someone now. Who's she gonna end up with? Or a girlfriend? Yes. I could absolutely see Manon being gay. Yep. Anyway, I'll see y'all tomorrow. I'm gonna go eat dinner now. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Love y'all. I don't know what chapters we're reading, but I'll have it scheduled. I'll stay here and I'll schedule it. I won't leave until I schedule it. But yeah, love y'all. Bye. Go to sleep, Bree. I know it's super late for you. Thank you for staying up with me. Bye.